views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
This show's audio was via a Skype call.
Get fired up for Spirit Fire Radio with your hosts, Dorothy, Riddle, and Steve Kramer. Get ready to shine the light on universal spiritual principles and uncover ways that ageless wisdom can guide you in cultivating consciousness in these modern times. Bring purpose to your life through practical spirituality and add to your awareness with Spirit Fire Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Dorothy, Riddle, and Steve Kramer.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to Spirit Fire Radio. It is wonderful to be with you and wonderful to be with my co-host, Dr. Dorothy Riddle. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, Steve. Great to be here today also.
Yes, and so exciting to be continuing our conversation on interconnectedness. So listeners, just to let you know, we're really at the beginning. We're at the precipice of a brand new season, and we are going to be talking about universal principles, ways that these principles, once we get to know them, once we get to understand the way the world around us works, it can make the experience of the spiritual path more meaningful, more purposeful, sort of affect our reality and determine the effectiveness, really, right, of our time here on planet Earth. So this whole year, we're going to be talking about these underlying principles. And one of those principles that is fundamental that, Dorothy, perhaps sometimes we forget, right, is that we are really interconnected. And so today we're going to talk about how that plays out in our cosmos. How does our cosmos function? And how is it a reflection of ways in which we function or could learn to function better if we simply follow the rules or the plan or the design, right?
That's right. That's right. And Steve, I think it's important just at the very beginning to remember that when we talk about interconnectedness and the fact that we are all part of a huge cosmic energy field, that means we're in it with people whether we like them or not. Right? We don't get to pick and choose and say, just you are in the pool with me, the rest of you aren't. And in fact, we'll be talking about that dynamic, I think, next week of when we try to separate ourselves from others. But I just thought in terms of today, just a reminder that this cosmic energy field includes everyone and everything.
Mm-hmm. Inclusivity. It's going to be a theme, I think, huh, Dorothy?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So do you have a quote? I know you usually come just ready with a great quote.
Yes. In fact, I have two that I'd like to share today. The first is from Dr. Brené Brown, who says, I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from that relationship. And that's a theme that I think we'll be talking about today, is that energy is relational.
Yes.
And then the other quote I wanted to share is from Martin Luther King Jr., who wrote, "Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality."
Very interesting. And I think we might even take that further to say that whatever affects one directly affects all directly. Maybe we're going to stretch it to that as well.
Not only indirectly, right, but directly. That's true.
Absolutely.
That's true. Well,
Nice.
and I think that brings us to trying to understand the fact that this world is not primarily material. It's not primarily matter, right?
Yes.
It's primarily energy. It is a field, not an object.
Yes. This idea of energy and matter being correlated, but we're in this material world, right? We see it, taste it, touch it, hear it, smell it. So many of us identify ourselves with this idea of materialism, and we've certainly expanded in the last few decades to really know, understand, prove that yes, indeed, matter and substance are very real. We can see it, we can identify with it, but we are so much more than that, that everything is energy. Everything is because of energy. Indeed.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One word, Dorothy, before we go into it is this word precipitation. I know in my studies in the last many, many years, this idea of precipitating, that something precipitates, this idea of a rain cloud and that a raindrop precipitates from a cloud, this idea of getting further and denser and denser until we see something. That always stuck with, that word somehow helped me realize this idea of energy and matter. I love that word, precipitation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And I think we can, if we think of matter as stuff or objects, even within our body, we have, if we think of the atoms, there's a lot of space in an atom, and there's a lot of water that we have within our bodies. We're not just always this solid mass that we seem to be. And
yes.
Even the matter itself depends on temperature, right? We can have ice or water or steam, depending upon what the temperature is.
Yes, it's sort of when I teach energy healing and energy medicine, and we sort of talk about the constitution of the human being, but we talk about it in very broad energy terms. And we start with, what is the densest form of energy? And we say, well, it's solids, right? And then we go to liquids, and then we go to gas. And it's very easy to understand ways in which this same substance can appear in very different sort of vibrational states or energetic states. And water is I just said precipitation before, right? Water is such a great example of that, because we all can relate to ice, water, liquid water, and steam, all H2O, but in different forms. And really, that's the way it works in every aspect. Every field of energy has got these layers that are denser than the other.
Mm-hmm.
They're quantifiable in a way.
Mm-hmm. That's right. But energy is also, it's not a thing. It's a capacity or a property. And to me, it's really important to think of it. It's what holds us together. It's what links us to each other. So when we think of that interconnectivity, what we're really talking about is that field of energy that surrounds and permeates us.
And that really was the basis for quantum physics. Yes, that was saying, it is really the space between things. It's really about the space between things. You were saying the Brené Brown quote about relationship, that it is not just the thing itself, but it's what those two things together represent. And what does the space between those, whether that space is close or far apart, or what is that space between, what is the stuff made of? What is the field that it all exists within? And so in a sense, whenever we're talking about energy, we're often talking about these things that exist within a field. So we're also talking about the parts and that which contains the parts, which I find interesting because we talked about that last week and the one life and this idea of sort of being a part of a bigger thing, of a greater whole. So it's important that we not only look at the separate parts, but what is the relationship of those parts and what's the ultimate container, right?
That's right. That's right. And I'd like to share a quote that I've shared before, if we have listeners that have been with us before. But to me, it is so dramatic in terms of helping us understand that. And it's from Brian Schwimm, a mathematical cosmologist. And he writes, "The energy emerges out of all-nourishing abyss, not only 15 billion years ago, but in every moment. Each instance, protons and antiprotons are flashing out of and are as suddenly absorbed back into all-nourishing abyss. All-nourishing abyss, then, is not a thing. nor a collection of things, nor even strictly speaking a physical space, but rather a power that gives birth and that absorbs existence at a thing's annihilation. The foundational reality of the universe is this unseen ocean of potentiality. If all the individual things of the universe were to evaporate, one would be left with an infinity of pure generative power or energy.
Wow. Intense.
Yeah. Very intense. And it underscores, I think, a really important difference between what we now know from quantum physics as compared to the older Newtonian physics model. And that is, our cosmos is probabilistic. It is not deterministic. There may be events that typically follow each other, so we think of them as cause and effect, but they don't have to. In other words, that relationship is like, it might be a 99.9% probability, but it's not 100%. And Steve, one of the things that brings to mind for me is that we have to be active in the world. We have responsibility. We can't just be passive observers. And yet I think the Newtonian model, the deterministic model, says to us, whatever will be, and, nothing you can do about it, just do what you want. Whereas the quantum physics says, no, you are the one that determines what happens. And I think in the next month or two, we'll keep talking about how we influence what it is that happens.
Well, that idea of potentiality, right? The idea of that word that was in that quote of potentiality says it all right there, that there is this potential, and what do you do with this? And this idea of an infinity of pure generative power. And we hear so much in modern spiritual realms that you are infinite. You are, you receive infinite intelligence and you create your own reality. That's really become this sort of mantra of the sort of modern spiritual movement, which we will talk about that as well, energy following thought and creating our own reality. This Newtonian idea, right, that well, what you see is what you get. And not only that, somebody up there by the name of G-O-D, has got a plan for you. You follow these rules or else. And really it was outside of ourselves that our reality was created. It was created for us. And goodness gracious, did that lead to a lot of trouble? Which we're going to talk about next week, I know. Anyway, Dorothy, we're at our first break, so we're going to take a break, listeners, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion on the cosmos and the ways in which it functions. We'll be right back.
Stay juicy. Tune in to Your Juicy Love with me, Una Drake, co-hosting monthly with Dr. Pat, and every second Monday at 12 p.m. on Transformation Talk Radio. My show, Your Juicy Love, helps you find the dynamic, life-affirming love you've always wanted. Transform your relationships and bring peace, joy, and juicy, juicy love to planet Earth. For more information, visit unadrake.com.
The Janice Underwood Show, helping you create the life you want, not the life you tolerate. Tune in each Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio as Janice delves into the life creator system and the next step in your spiritual evolution. Janice Underwood is gifted at helping spiritually minded people shift their mindsets to unleash the creator within. Our souls wish to wake us up. Those of us listening hear the call. Do you? For more information, visit JaniceUnderwood.com.
Practice living in wholeness with the body tune-up. 6 classes for $89 designed for radical self-healing and self-regeneration. Heal the deepest root of any challenge. The mental body was programmed in negativity, not good enough, separate from source. You're too much, you'll never make it. The emotional body holds all the pain and trauma of emotional suppression, all the pain from this life and life's past. The spiritual body is the place you connect with your higher power, your higher self, with the image and likeness of the One. The physical body houses and expresses the other three bodies every day. Go to CorneliaStephanie.com. Evolve, become a practitioner. We need to heal, integrate, and bring into wholeness and harmony the physical body, addressing all the other bodies in order to live in our true, authentic nature.
Do you ever feel as if you're working twice as hard but only getting half as far? Are you trying to connect with your path in life and finding it elusive? Mainstream Metaphysics Radio is a weekly call-in show where we harness our connection with the universe and use what is in our power to affect change for optimal success and happiness. This hit show bridges the divide between what is and what we do not know. Eve, named one of the country's top psychics, also known as the MBA psychic, invites you on this journey for this live call-in show with readings, featured guests, leaders, and visionaries in both business and spiritual callings. So join Eve Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com as she takes metaphysics mainstream. For more information about Eve, visit EliteTarot.com. That's EliteTarot.com.
Welcome back to Spirit Fire Radio. It's lovely to be with you. Dorothy and I represent two educational nonprofit organizations, and we have come together in the spirit of cooperation and collaboration to create Spirit Fire Radio. So just take a minute to tell you a bit about our organizations, because they are really both up to very good things, huh, Dorothy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm with the School for Esoteric Studies. And you can find out more about us at esotericstudies.net. But we provide spiritual training for people who already have a spiritual practice that they want to deepen. And we do that through study, meditation, and service. And we have lots of interesting information on our website. Right now, those of you that know that there's a period called the 3 Linked Festivals, we have a subjective group conference that runs during that time, and you can find out more about that on our website and participate in it if you are interested.
Yes, wonderful information. Dorothy, on my end, you cut out a bit right when you were saying the name of the school, which is the School for Esoteric Studies. So perhaps that was just on my end. If not, why not say it again? Yeah, wonderful website with so much great information. I am here on behalf of Spirit Fire, and we are an educational nonprofit that is focused on practical spirituality, on the practice of living awareness, which is our meditation program, really finding ways to generate consciousness and awareness and showing you ways that you can apply that to your everyday life. We've got a retreat center in Western Massachusetts where we have lots of wonderful programs. We do an online meditation practice and online classes, and you can find out lots more at spiritfire.com. We've got a bunch of silent retreats coming up this summer. So if you're interested in some silent retreats, look us up. Silence, right? Beautiful thing. We've done whole shows on silence, right? Beautiful.
We've talked about silence, just so that our listeners don't think you tune in and you get an hour of no talking whatsoever.
That could be fun, right? Let's give it a try. Poor producers, they go crazy. All right. So continuing this conversation, Dorothy, I just wanted to say, what's interesting when we just look at our physical vehicle, and I love that you mentioned ice, water, and steam in this wonderful, threes. We see threes a lot, 3 is this magic number. But we think about even in our body that we've got physical, we've got bones and muscles, and then we've also got blood, we've got urine, we've got liquids, and we've got air, we've got steam. So our body's got all 3 of these sort of very typical states of matter. And we've got this physical vehicle, this field of energy that has sort of condensed or materialized that we can associate with. It is our physical body. But our emotional vehicle. This is also sort of a vibrational level. This is something that we possess. It's a thing. We have got emotions, and they always have varied fields as well. We've got a mental vehicle, and those have got varied fields as well. So I get excited when we talk about energy and ways that we relate. And for listeners who haven't considered that, you are made of energy, and then it's not always this just you are so much more than your physical body. And then that your personality actually is a combination of your body, your emotions, and mind. It's specific to you and your experience. Just love the ways in which we can look at ourselves and our experience in ways that we can expand out to just see the fullness of the ways that we're energy beings of receiving and emitting, right?
Right, absolutely. And that ebb and flow is absolutely critical. I think we'll come back to that. But I'd just like to interject at this point that when we think of energy, we think of fields, we think of movement, but there's another state of energy that is, I think, important for us to recognize and own, and that is what we call tension. So a lot of time we talk about tension as something that's negative, I'm too tense. But in fact, we cannot act unless we've accumulated energy into a point of tension. You can think of like a rubber band that you stretch, and you could, like, if you want to send it across the room, if it's just flaccid, it's not going to go anywhere. But if you stretch it, you create that tension, and then you let it go, and it'll go, boom, right across the room. So we are always, when we act intentionally, we are always acting from a point of tension. And we can be much more conscious of how we are working with or against energy if we remember that principle.
And intention meaning sort of, I would say, consolidated thought, right? Thought brought to a single point, right? That then has got a trajectory. The more specific your intention, or rather, you can think of it as the further back you pull the rubber band, right? The further that's going to go, the greater effect, the greater trajectory, right? And I think, wouldn't you also relate that to tension within relationships? That's how we resolve something. When we've built up enough tension and we've got enough forces acting upon each other in a way that then creates a trajectory of, I see the opposite of that. We hope that leads then to some sort of resolve, but it's the tension that allows us to see the other. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Where I go from there is, if I am just, again, passive, which is the state, I think that thinking of our world as deterministic encourages in us, then I'm not going to do very much. I mean, I might be in relationship with someone, I might be sitting there having lunch or whatever, but I'm not particularly focused. Whereas if I become intentional about my awareness and about my focus, then I can have a very deep conversation. I can feel connected at a very active and deep level with the other person. That's not going to happen unless there is some intentionality. There is some tension that we are bringing to the environment, some personal ownership over what's happening.
Yeah. There's also, it reminds me of that word tensegrity, which was created to combine tension and integrity. And it's a system where the whole system simultaneously adapts to any force that enters it. Like our body is basically a tensegrity system. And I think that's what we're working with as a human, really as a human species, is how do we become a singular part that can hold intention that is pure to us, to our individuality, but how can we recognize our system so that when there's an impact, we can spread that, around our entire structure, that really we are part of the tensegrity system. We are all interdependent, and it's when we separate that space between us. Tensegrity system has very specific points, but they're all connected and they all recognize and distribute in a very, harmonic way. It's quite beautiful to look at a tensegrity system in action.
Mm-hmm. And I think the building on that, again, we need imagery to help us remember that we are not separate things. As soon as we think of ourselves as a thing, as an object, then we create space between ourselves and the next object, right?
Yes.
But Irvin Laszlo, who's a physicist, I think put it really well. He said, although what we perceive with our senses is solid matter moving about in empty space, in reality, the material world, including particles, stars, planets, rocks, and living organisms, are not the material universe is not material. It is a field of interacting waves.
Yeah. So, just to translate that for our listeners, we're talking about the ways in which that is a reflection of our society, of us, of people, of humanity, of our own evolution. It seems that, that's what we're working to understand constantly, and to sort of remind ourselves of what is happening in the space between us. What is the relationship, right, between us, that we're not alone? I mean, it sounds so simplistic, but if we get down to it, it is about our relationships. How can we look at our relationships and what they are showing us, what they're reflecting to us, right?
Right, and that brings us to a concept that, again, comes from quantum physics, that is odd and quirky, but very real, and that is what's known as non-local connectedness, or non-local entanglement. The fact that we are actually connected to, all through the cosmos, not just to things that are right next to us. And one of the concepts, Steve, that I found very helpful is there's a writer I was reading recently who named the myth that creates problems for us as local realism. And what they meant by that was that we start to believe, or we do believe, that the properties of physical objects exist independent of whether or not they're observed by anyone. So, in other words, there's all these physical objects, and they're also separate from each other, right? They're all sitting around, and they're static, and they're there no matter what, whether I'm there or not. They're always there. And then another part of that is that that energy can only travel at the speed of light. And so it has to be local. It can't be instantaneous. But in fact, that's not true. At the quantum level, I don't want to get too detailed about this, but at the quantum level,
we have about 30 seconds before our break.
Okay.
And maybe we'll have to talk about it when we come back from the break. But go on, just give us a little hint.
Okay, so nothing exists until the instant it is measured or observed. It's that process of measurement that brings it into reality.
Which is huge. I actually can't wait to come back from the break and talk about this, because that basically tells us that energy follows thought, and it leads us to this idea that we create our own reality. So listeners, when we come back, we're going to actually talk about particle and wave, are we not? Basically, yes.
Absolutely.
You are both, listeners. You are a particle and a wave. So we'll be right back after this message.
Did you know that all of the shows on the Transformation Radio Network are available as podcasts to stream or download?
Really?
Check us out. Go to transformationradio.fm. We have business shows, spiritual shows, energy healing shows, and pretty much everything in between. Something for everyone, guaranteed to inspire, educate, and transform. We are transforming the world, one listener at a time.
This is Debbie Pokornik with a break-free parenting tip. Parenting will always be a bit of a mystery. Who knows why some parenting ideas work and others do not? Or why some kids seem to succeed despite family setbacks, while others have so much given to them and yet fail to thrive? The one thing we do know is that once you have a child, you'll never be quite the same again. Awe-inspiring emotions like overwhelming love, extreme guilt, intense frustration, and incredible joy make this job second to none. Breaking free of parenting pressures means recognizing the pieces that make us unique, the pieces that we carry with us from the past, and the pieces that are influenced by the society we live in. When we can pick and choose which pieces we want to keep around and change the others to align with our inner wisdom, we will feel more self-assured in our role as a parent.
For information and to work with Debbie, visit empoweringnrg.com.
Hi, this is Laura Richer, host of On the Verge Radio. Sometimes you hear encouraging messages like transform your life now, become empowered, create the life you crave, and it all seems overwhelming and you're not sure where to start. I'm here to tell you that self-improvement is not always fun and easy, but it is always worth it. The path to creating positive changes begins with releasing the things that have been holding you back. Then you can create a life that inspires you. I know this because I've done it. You can find out more about what I do by visiting my website, seattlehealinghypnosis.com. I look forward to supporting you on your journey.
Introducing the Lucid Planet, a digital gathering place featuring cutting-edge, high-vibrational content that will empower and inspire you to become the greatest version of yourself. Visit the Lucid Planet today to stimulate your mind, body, and soul as you connect with a global community of like-minded people. The Lucid Planet is edited by renowned psychologist and author Dr. Kelly Neff, who is here to help you cope with anxiety, connect to your higher purpose, uncover your true passions, and live your dreams. Dr. Kelly's fresh, compassionate perspective emphasizes growth, transformation, healing, and thriving. Even in the face of adversity, say goodbye to bad news and low vibrational media for good and become part of the larger collective of people working together to navigate the global shift of consciousness and transform the world from within. Join the planet, the Lucid Planet. Visit thelucidplanet.com. Welcome home.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Spirit Fire Radio. Just before the break, we were leading the way to talking about non-local connectedness. Wow. So we're basically talking about what Einstein called spooky actions at a distance. He said they weren't possible, which meant that two things could be affected. I'm going to put it this way. Entangled particles, right? They can be separated as far apart as no matter how far apart they are, they can have immediately influences one on the other, regardless of the distance between them. So an immediate effect, once one changes, it affects in another, irregardless of time and space. So it's basically saying time and space collapse, correct? That one particle is affected by another, no matter how far apart they are. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. That's right. And I think we're going to, in one of the months, we're going to talk in more detail about one aspect of that, which is that time is not actually linear. It's simultaneous.
Ooh, that's an huh?
So you can tuck that away as something that we'll explore more. But yes, some people talk about this as the butterfly effect, right? A butterfly flaps its wings here, and it gets felt in some way or another through the airstreams all around the world. And so distant objects do have a direct effect on one another. Now, that can be hard. Steve, I have to confess, I've been thinking and writing about this for a while, but it can be hard to grasp in your everyday life. But the bottom line is that what we do, what we say, what we think, the energy that we put out does have an effect on the world. It may not have exactly the effect we would like, but it does have an effect, which means that if we are not intentional, we're just sitting around being grumpy and feeling terrible, that energy is also having an effect on the world.
Right. So then let's just go back, just as you say, to the particle and wave. I mean, really, where there were these huge breakthroughs in physics was this split, the observer effect, right? The double slit experiment, where literally particles, there was a wave, and waves become a particle. They drop down into form as soon as they are observed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
which means that the essential state is the wave state.
Yes.
It's not the particle state.
And so your actions become a particle, and that particle has an effect on every other particle and through the wave.
Mm-hmm.
Is the way to say it. It gets really, really tricky, huh? There's one of my favorite spiritual writers is Gary Zukav, and he wrote the Dancing Wu-Li Masters, where he got physicists from all over the world together for he intended, I think, for a week. It turned into 30 days, and then I think that turned into 3 months, and wrote this book that was basically trying to translate quantum physics, modern physics, and draw the bridge to quantum physics, and then relate it to spirituality. Dorothy, I've read this book 15 times, and I think I get it. I go to sleep and I wake up and, oh man, just nonsense. But when you have, you realize, yes, I sense that.
Well, and I think it's important for our listeners to understand that we are often unaware of how deeply steeped we are in this deterministic worldview. And it's been over 100 years since scientists have proved to us that the universe is probabilistic, and that what we do, what we think, what we say makes a difference. It's not just this cause and effect activity outside ourselves. But it's difficult to bring into our awareness and really, really understand it in terms of our everyday lives.
And Dorothy, that leads us to this concept of continuity of consciousness, and I believe we mentioned it just for a minute in the last in our last week's show. And that was a big revelation for me, to realize that the existence of the soul, this idea that who I am and my existence is beyond even this lifetime, that in some way I am a part of this energy field, and even as I leave this physical body, that will continue on, that I will become a part of the next greater field. And that for me was so liberating and so just wowing to sort of come to understand that it allows you to see that, well, my actions are meaningful. If there is a continuity of consciousness, I want to be sure to contribute in a way that is meaningful and that will be everlasting. And if you think about it in terms of, there's a physicist and writer named David Hawkins, and doctor, PhD, got so many letters after his name, and David Hawkins, not to be confused with Stephen Hawkins, who talks about the various levels of energy fields, in that the body cannot perceive the body itself, that it takes our sensory perceptions and our nervous system to experience the body. And then it takes the brain to experience these sensory perceptions. And then it takes the mind to experience what the brain is sorting out. And then it takes consciousness to experience the mind and its thoughts. So you see that all of these fields of energy, and actually fields of awareness, exist within a greater field. And so to realize that I am actually a part of a greater field, and that even my consciousness is a part of a greater consciousness that could be termed perhaps awareness, a field of awareness. And to think that my time here, is specific. I could look at my physical body, my emotional body, my mental body, my spiritual body, but that I am an aspect of this greater, larger field. It's quite the liberating sort of realization.
I agree. And if we come at it from a slightly different perspective, I would say, from my understanding, that the soul is what is actually real, And it's like, I think of it like the soul is like me when I look down and I see these little ants that are crawling around doing things. They don't have the same perspective that I have, right? And the soul has a perspective much beyond what I in this physical body have. And the soul, before the soul is discarnate. Before I choose to incarnate into a physical body, the soul chooses what my life purpose is, what it is I'm to do here, and I will energetically follow in a freer fashion if I am following that intention, that very original intention for my life.
Yes, and you are precipitated right into this form.
Right.
And the
That's
soul
right.
being that, as the ageless wisdom teachings will say that the soul is the bridge between the mind and this greater spiritual consciousness, this greater one life, that it is through the soul that we access these higher levels of our sort of spiritual experience.
Mm-hmm. Another way that people talk about this is the process of sleep. We lose consciousness when we sleep, or we lose a certain level of consciousness when we sleep. And so then people ask the question, am I the same person when I wake up as when I went to sleep?
Yes.
Is there something that is continuous through that whole process that includes dream time and everything?
Yes. You mentioned the soul's intention, and I just think intention is such a wonderful word. We've mentioned it, when we were talking about tension in the first segment, and it's this. Intention has got so much to do with the outcome. Really, that actions create consequences, and the intention moves that action in a very specific direction. It creates very different consequences. So it sort of will tincture that space between and that relationship, asking ourselves, what is my intention? Sort of without knowing what your intention is, you're just acting automatically, or you could say unconsciously. That's sort of like that flaccid rubber band. You're just kind of flailing about. And so it's like, if you shout at someone, if you're shouting, what is the intention of your shout? Are you angry? Are you saying, be quiet, no more talking? You're then imposing your will on somebody, and you're creating certain consequences. There is a certain field and relationship that's created between you. And when you're shouting at someone, be quiet, it's that sort of separateness and competition, if you will, like my voice is going to be louder than yours. But if you're shouting at someone because they're about to walk in a patch of poison ivy, like we're about to do here all the time at Spirit Fire, or if you're saying to someone, hey, watch out, you're about to walk out into traffic, your intention is harmony and cooperation, and you're looking out for someone. It's goodwill. So, it's so much about our intention, that we look to our intention and what are we creating with the energy behind our actions. We have to be so aware of that, of that field. What does our thought, what does our action, what does our, what is behind our action? Because that will affect everything, around us.
And that brings us back to the fact that in a probabilistic universe, we are responsible for what we do with our energy.
Yes.
And the consequences of what we do with our energy.
And that it can have an effect in very different ways, In each of those situations, we can see that there is a probabilistic outcome, and choice. Choice is, responsibility, the keynote of the soul. I know I've said that many times on this show, but this ability to respond. Do you have the ability to respond with an intention that is inclusive, that is aligned with the way our cosmos functions, right? That says that we are all interdependent and all interconnected. And, you mentioned that with Brene Brown, that is really, connection is meaningful. I think you said, when it's basically when it's good, when it's without judgment, when somebody is heard and seen and valued. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in the context of the soul, we can think of, you were talking about responsibility as the ability to respond, but it's also the willingness to take, to have a purposeful intention that is harmless.
Yes, yes. And we're going to talk about that next week, listeners, just to give you a little preview. We're going to talk about separateness. We've been talking about interconnectivity and the fact that our cosmos functions really on this principle that we are all interconnected. We're all part of this one field, and it has simultaneous effects. And we're going to talk about ways in which we limit ourselves by creating separateness amongst us. So I look very forward to that. Dorothy, we're going to go to a break, and then we'll talk a bit more about, I know we want to talk about energy follows thought, such a guiding principle in the way we behave and our consequences of our actions. So more on that when we come back.
Tune in to the hit show Raging Skillet Radio, Mouthing Off with Chef Rossi. Chef Rossi mouths off about different subjects in pursuit of breaking down walls and opening up your minds. She and Dr. Pat banter back and forth, taking from the headlines of the day on subjects that reach beyond what goes on in the world into your hearts. And go to theragingskillet.com to find out more and let Chef Rossi know what's on your mind.
How would you like increased health and vitality? How would you like to avoid the onset of disease as well as slow the aging process? This is all possible through a simple, safe, and natural process. Every day we are either moving toward wellness or away from wellness.
Hi, I'm Mary Jane Mack. I'd like to be your partner in achieving optimal health. Contact me now at maryjanemack.com or call 425-392-0659. Visit maryjanemack.com.
Defining success and putting minds to work. With the Higher Learners Career and Leadership Series, Rudy Racine will help you craft your personal definition of success, offering support and guidance as you move forward towards your goals. Take the leap. With the right mix of focus and motivation, anything can be achieved. Tune in every first and third Monday at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 Eastern, and for more information on Rudy Racine and Higher Learners, visit Rudy's site at higherlearners.com. That's HIRE learners.com.
Winning at the game of money. Lynn Brown is now offering Full Spectrum Finance, a progressive 12-month program that will help you to navigate through the mechanics of financial expansion. Finally, a financial planner who looks at the full spectrum of money and abundance. Engage you in the mental, physical, and energetic aspects of finance. This is Full Spectrum Finance. Are you ready to get into it? For more information, go to fullspectrumfinance.com.
Tune in to The Jen Royster Show, intuitive guidance to inspire your life, each Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific and 11 a.m. Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com. This amazing show is an inspirational hour that will take you on an epic metaphysical journey to discover the spiritual approach to life's greatest challenges. Dr. Jen is an internationally known intuitive counselor, spiritual teacher, and energy healer. Call in for intuitive readings and visit JenRoyster.com for more information.
Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show, talk radio to thrive by. I am so thrilled to be talking to all of you. We have got talk radio for all of us. Are you ready and willing and able to accept all of the abundance you can muster up in your life? Check us out at drpatshow.com, transformationtalkradio.com, transformationradio.fm. Oh my goodness.
Welcome back, listeners, to Spirit Fire Radio. We're talking this week about interconnectedness and how our cosmos actually functions. And, Steve, I just wanted to share with our listeners a book written by Jane Roberts some years ago called The Education of Oversoul 7. There's actually a trilogy, but the basic concept to me was really fascinating in terms of this continuity of consciousness and our actually being part of a field. So I'd like to just take a minute to introduce people to that. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great.
So the idea of Oversoul 7 is that as an Oversoul, 7 is responsible for a number of other souls. So this is the whole idea of different entities in the one container. And Oversoul 7 is responsible for a personality living in 10,000 BC, a personality living in the 17th century, a personality living in the 20th century, and a personality living in the 23rd century. And so you can see already this concept of of time not being linear, of time being simultaneous. And the consciousness of these four lives is interwoven, right? They're all part of this Oversoul. And Oversoul 7 keeps getting into difficulty because it allows too much bleeding in one of different lives, so that the life in 10,000 BC suddenly gets an insight out of apparently no place that actually comes from the life in the 23rd century, and so on. And so what Jane Roberts is trying to describe is this field of consciousness that we're all part of, this field of energy, this field of awareness. And it's really, if you haven't read it, it's really interesting. It's a book like The Wrinkle in Time that just helps you change the way in which you view and experience your everyday life.
It also reminds me of Cloud Atlas, which is also another wonderful storyline of the ways in which, continuity of consciousness, and the ways in which our lives and the actions in our lives will affect not only the life we're in, but could potentially affect our past lives and future lives, that it's all happening at once, one big creative field of potential. If nothing else, it exercises your brain itself as an organ, right? It expands, it creates lots of new synapses when you try to stretch your brain that way.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to, Dorothy, perhaps summarize, just as we talk about quantum physics, because what is so important within at least this idea of the observer effect is that we really, as thinking minds, our mind is so powerful. And that as we observe something, as we think a thought, we precipitate that thought becomes a thing. The Ageless Wisdom talks about thought forms all the time, that when you think it is now a thing that can be contended with just like a chair in a room. And so we have to be very careful with our thoughts and our choices and our intentions. And this idea that something, that light, that energy is a wave and precipitates into form, into a particle as soon as we observe it, meaning we recognize it, we realize it. I love that word realize. It's come into reality. It's just so important really in modern spiritual thinking anyway. Every spiritual leader I can think of basically says, Seth, Jane Roberts, who is responsible for the Seth material, says that, beliefs, a quote from Seth, beliefs are not buried unless you believe that they are. That meaning beliefs create our reality. The thoughts and feelings and emotions that guide you are quite literally there if you're willing to simply look. And says it's all creative and constructive, meaning our thoughts and feelings and emotions are creative and constructive. They build something. Mike Dooley says thoughts become things. Dr. Joe Dispenza always talks about, he wrote the book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which is about how to create your own reality. Bruce Lipton, right, in Epigenetics, the Biology of Belief, and Esther Hicks talking about the point of attraction, and Lynn McTaggart. The list goes on. These people who are all telling us that the power is in the mind, and that really these potentialities exist. And as soon as we think the thought, that potentiality becomes all the more real. It becomes a thing. So it brings it, it shows us the level of responsibility that we have in creating our own reality and the reality of everybody else in this one life, in this interconnected universe.
That's so true, Steve. And I think one of the links that we sometimes miss or intentionally overlook is when we think of we focus on speech. I mean, speech is important to pay attention to. It has a lot of power. Speech is thoughts clothed in sounds so that those thoughts can be shared readily with others. But it's the thought itself that is actually the positive or negative energetic influence. And when we get to that level, it can be a little unnerving that, it's fairly easy to think about monitoring our speech and not saying inappropriate or harmful things to or about somebody else. But to think about monitoring our thoughts in the same way is usually someplace we don't want to go, right? It takes effort.
Sure, because, it's once again, we're talking about these levels of form. The speech is dense. We can sort of wrap our head around it because it's that much more dense, and thoughts come and go. To train the mind is a big deal, as we know here at Spirit Fire teaching meditation, right? Mm-hmm. Dorothy, we have just a couple of minutes left, and I know you had a Bailey quote. Do you think we have time for it? Because you're talking about layers of things, and Alice Bailey can be so eloquent in talking about that. Perhaps we have time for it quick.
Okay, let me squeeze it in. This is a quote from Alice Bailey. She writes, "Energy is now regarded as all that is. Manifestation is the manifestation of a sea of energies, some of which are built into forms. Others constitute the medium in which those forms live and move and have their being. And still others are in process of animating both the forms and their environing substantial media. It must also be remembered that forms exist within forms. This is the basis of the symbolism that's found in the intricate carved ivory balls of the Chinese craftsman, where ball within ball is to be discovered, all elaborately carved and all free and yet confined. You, as you sit in your room, are a form within a form. Forms are composed of tangible substance that, when coordinated and brought together by some recognized design or idea in the mind of some thinker, creates a material form. This tangible substance is composed of living energies vibrating in relation to each other, yet owning their own quality and their own qualified life."
Wow, poetry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there you go, their own quality and their own qualified life. We have got our own identity, our own personality, that which we offer to this greater experience that is the spiritual being having a human experience, as we've said, but we are a part of a bigger ball, right? We've got to understand that. And science has absolutely proven this, that we are a part of something bigger than our material selves. So, Dorothy, that was a wonderful quote, a wonderful way to end this show. And to let listeners know, we're going to talk about what happens when you believe that you are a ball outside of that Chinese, out of like those Russian dolls. You're outside of that system. You're not. You are within it. So we're going to talk about separateness and what that leads to. It's really going to be an interesting conversation. I look forward to it. Once again, spiritfire.com and the School for Esoteric Studies. Say it, Dorothy.
At esotericstudies.net.
Yes, thank you. We will see you next week. Thanks so much, Dorothy.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Fire Radio. Tune in each Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern for your weekly guide to purposeful living and practical spirituality. Join hosts Steve Kramer and Dorothy Riddle as they shine the light on universal spiritual principles and uncover ways that ageless wisdom can guide you in cultivating consciousness in your everyday life. Add to your awareness with Spirit Fire Radio. To learn more, visit spiritfireradio.com.